Hey everyone, 99% of you watching aren't subscribed. Let's change that. Hit that subscribe button, and at 1,000 subscribers, we'll drop special stories just for you.
The galaxy had grown tired of its own wars. For 312 standard cycles, the Concord of 12 systems had resisted the Varelian swarm. Entire nebulae had been stripped to mineral skeletons. Dyson lattices that once shimmered like constellations had been reduced to drifting scrap. Refugee Orcs moved from system to system in slow, desperate caravans, each jump preceded by the same fearful calculation. Are we next? The swarm did not negotiate. It did not issue ultimatums. It did not recognize borders or sovereignty. It expanded because expansion was its nature, an ecological inevitability on a galactic scale. The Concord, for all its brilliance, had never been forced to confront inevitability before. They were an alliance of elder civilizations. The Lyrath were beings of crystalline matrices and harmonic thought, communicating in refracted light. The Avara existed as distributed gaseous intelligences within sculpted magnetic fields. The Doran had engineered their bodies into living starships. The Keth ran entire worlds through predictive probability engines that calculated futures centuries in advance. They had solved entropy on planetary scales. They had cured extinction. Until now, the young species. Humans were different. They were new. Their first faster-than-light signal had been messy, an overpowered burst that rippled unevenly through subspace. It carried not just mathematics, but fragments of music, archived television, arguments from public forums, encrypted military chatter, and a cooking show. The Concord had nearly dismissed them. A species still arguing over internal divisions did not seem promising. But humans spread quickly. Within a century, they had colonies across 30 systems. They terraformed harsh worlds rather than avoiding them. They built habitats inside asteroid belts. They mined rogue planets. They sent exploratory craft into unstable regions of Concord and flagged as impractical. And, most troublingly, their military doctrine did not match their diplomatic posture. They argued loudly in public forums. They compromised in trade agreements. They smiled in negotiations. But their defense budgets were disproportionate. When the swarm first brushed human territory, consuming an unaligned fringe world called Carve, the Concord observed quietly. They expected protest. They expected evacuation. They expected a defensive coalition request. Instead, human fleets mobilized without public declaration. Within 6 months, the swarm biomass in that region had vanished. The Concord's observers detected gravitational anomalies consistent with microsingularity collapse. They did not understand what they were seeing. The assembly at Keros. The Concord assembly chamber orbited a neutron star named Keros, a relic of an ancient supernova. Its gravity was harvested and stabilized. Its radiation filtered through lattice arrays that glowed like woven starlight. Delegates manifested in forms comfortable to their species. Crystalline spires, floating plasma rings, articulated mechanical avatars. The human delegation arrived physically. 3 individuals. No entourage. No display of grandeur. The lead representative was Admiral Alara Vance, retired from active fleet command, but still carried herself with the stillness of someone accustomed to violence. Her uniform bore no medals. That unsettled the Lyrath immediately. Saul, High Arbiter of the Concord, initiated proceedings. Species designation: human. Sovereign coalition: United Terran Directorate and affiliated colonial governments. You have been summoned under Article 9. Existential threat arbitration. Alara Vance inclined her head slightly. We receive your request. The chamber darkened as a projection of the Varelian swarm filled the void between delegates. It was beautiful, in a terrible way, vast, flowing structures like luminous coral reefs drifting between stars. Tendrils extended toward inhabited systems. At the edges of projection, entire planets dimmed. The swarm has advanced 27 light-years in 8 cycles, Saul said. Our projections indicate complete territorial collapse within 40. 40 cycles? Vance asked. 40 of your years. She nodded once. We require soldiers, Saul said. Disciplined ground forces and fleet units capable of sustained engagement. Your species demonstrates unusual tolerance for attrition. We are prepared to compensate accordingly. A faint smile touched Vance's lips. Compensate, she repeated. The word carried weight in the chamber. The Avara representative pulsed in irritation. We offer technological exchange, territory rights, resource allocation. You misunderstand, Vance said softly. She stepped forward and activated a wrist interface. A new projection replaced the swarm. Human vessels, black holes absorbing light rather than reflecting it. Angular, efficient, almost austere. No visible insignia. No ceremonial markings. These are not our primary fleets, Vance said. They are not carriers, not colony ships, not patrol units. What are they? Asked the Doran emissary, its voice vibrating to the chamber like distant thunder. Our last resort. Saul's facets brightened cautiously. Then you will deploy them as soldiers. Vance met the Arbiter's refracted gaze. You're asking the wrong species for soldiers, she said. A ripple of confusion passed through the chamber. Your historical records contradict that statement, Saul replied. Your species has engaged in continuous warfare since achieving combustion propulsion. Yes, Vance agreed. We have. She expanded the projection. Internal schematics unfolded. Spines of dense containment chambers running the length of each ship. At their core, gravitational compression matrices surrounding artificially sustained stellar matter. Soldiers occupy territory, Vance said. They hold lines. They defend. She tapped the projection. The containment matrices flared red. These ships don't hold lines. A pause. They erased them. Silence descended. The Concord predictive engines ran trillions of simulations simultaneously. Most returned catastrophic casualty projections. You would deploy singularity devices at fleet scale? Saul asked, if necessary. That is disproportionate force. Against something that consumes biospheres. Vance's voice remained calm. Proportions stopped mattering when they ate their first planet. The Avara representative flared brightly. Collateral damage is minimized, Vance interrupted. Collapsars are directional, controlled. We refine them. Refined? Saul echoed. Yes. The word hung heavy. The choice. The chamber's gravity fluctuated slightly as Caros pulsed beyond his containment field. The Concord had long prided itself on restraint, on ethical warfare, on incremental escalation. The swarm had rendered those principles ineffective. Saul dimmed his crystalline facets in contemplation. If we authorize deployment, he said, what assurances do we have that your executioners will remain under Concord oversight? Vance's expression did not change. You don't. The honesty struck harder than defiance would have. We are not joining your chain of command, she continued. We are offering assistance. On our terms. And those terms, we end the swarm's advance, she said. You stay out of our way. The Doran emissary rotated its armored carapace. You assume success. Vance's gaze hardened. No, she said quietly. We assume cost. The chamber fell still. At last, Saul spoke. If we refuse, then we fortify our own borders, she replied. And when the swarm reaches you will reconsider. It was not a threat. It was worse. It was practical. The Concord retreated into rapid deliberation. Light pulses, magnetic oscillations, encrypted quantum exchanges. After 13 minutes, an eternity by their standards, they reached consensus. Saul faced the humans. The Concord authorizes human military intervention under Article 9. A beat. We asked for soldiers. Vance deactivated projection of the black ships. You'll get something better, she said. Outside the chamber, far beyond Caros, dark human vessels shifted from standby orbit and aligned toward the Hethrian Veil. The galaxy had asked for soldiers. Humanity had already begun preparing the executioners. The Hethrian Veil had once been a trade corridor. 7 luminous systems arranged in a gentle arc, connected by stable jump geometry and threaded with habitats, shipyards, and orbital gardens. Its stars were young and bright. Its space was busy. Now it burned. The Varelian swarm moved the veil like a living storm front. Vast bioconstructs, some larger than moons, drifted between planets, wrapped in membranes that shimmer with electromagnetic discharge. Tendrils extended outward in fractal patterns, harvesting debris wreckage, and, where resistance failed, entire oceans. Concord fleets held a defensive perimeter at the outer edge of the third system. They had fortified it with mine lattices, gravity shear fields, and rotating artillery platforms that fired condensed plasma in coordinated arcs. For months, they had slowed the swarm's advance by fractions of astronomical units. Slowed, never stopped. Inside the command sphere of the Lyra flagship Radiant Principle, High Arbiter Sol observed the engagement through refracted sensory arrays. Concord vessels were elegant, curved hulls of luminous composite, shields layered in harmonic frequencies. They were being torn apart. Swarm organisms did not fire weapons in conventional sense. They collided with physics. Gravitational distortions rippled outward from their cores, shredding shields and bending metal like softened wax. Boarding spores the size of frigates attached to hulls, and began dissolving them from the outside in. Left flank collapse probability 82%, reported a Ket predictive node. Reinforced with Doran-heavy cruisers, Sol ordered. They will not arrive before breach. The swarm's forward mass surged. Then space folded. The arrival. There was no flare of conventional translation. No flare of blue-white jump light. Instead, reality pinched, like fabric drawn tight, and black shapes slipped through. Human vessels. 30 of them. They did not broadcast identification. They did not form a defensive wall. They scattered. Sol's sensors struggled to track their vectors. Each ship accelerated independently, cutting across the battlefield at oblique angles, ignoring Concord formations entirely. Human fleet, Sol transmitted across priority channels. You're entering an active kill zone, aligned with defensive grid. The response came not from a fleet admiral, but from an automated relay. Executioner Group Sigma. Engagement protocol active. Maintain minimum safe distance. 2 million kilometers. That is impossible, muttered a Doran tactician. The swarm occupies the entire. The first human ship ignited. The collapsar, from a distance. It appeared as a flare at the vessel's core, an unnatural brightness that did not radiate outward. Instead, light bent toward it. The swarm-dread organism nearest the human ship extended a filament, perhaps sensing energy to consume. The filament never touched. The human vessel vanished, not an explosion, but an implosion. A sphere of warp space snapped into existence, no larger than a city, and for less than a second a singularity bloomed. The dread organism folded. Its kilometer-thick carapace crushed inward. Internal plasma sacs detonated under pressure measured in stellar cores. The organism's gravitational anchor collapsed, dragging surrounding biomass with it. Then the singularity evaporated. Where a swarm capital mass had been, there was only debris and expanding vapor, and no human ship. Silence rippled through the battlefield. Concord vessels recalibrated sensors, searching for debris signatures consistent with reactor overload. There were none. The human ship had not exploded. It had ceased. Confirmed, whispered Keth Analyst. Self-induced gravitational collapse. Total structural annihilation. The swarm recoiled. For the first time in recorded engagements, its forward advance halted, not from resistance, but from disruption. Then the second human ship ignited, and the third, and the fourth. The pattern. The executioners did not attack randomly. They targeted structural nodes, mass concentrations where multiple swarm organisms were interlinked through gravitational synchronization. Each collapsar strike severed not just biomass but coordination. Within minutes, gaps tore through the swarm formation. Concord gunners seized the opportunity, firing concentrated barges into exposed tissue. Doran cruisers rammed destabilized organisms, their armor hulls carving through softened membranes. But it was clear whose strategy defined the battle. Human fleet, Sol transmitted urgently. You are expending vessels at unsustainable rates. This time, a human voice answered. Admiral Vance. Affirmative. Your losses exceed tactical norms. A faint crackle of background noise, distant alarms, perhaps Those ships were built for this, Vance said. You are sacrificing crews. No, she replied. We're sacrificing platforms. Saul's internal matrices recalculated. You have automated these vessels? Partially. Minimal crew. Volunteers. The word registered. Volunteers. Across the veil, another collapsar ignited. This one at the heart of a dense swarm cluster threatening the inhabited world of Meritha's Fall. The resulting implosion consumed not only the cluster, but several boarding organisms already attached to Concord frigates. Those frigates drifted free, scarred but intact. The swarm began to adapt. It redirected gravitational tendrils toward approaching human ships, attempting to crush them before they reached optimal detonation range. The next executioner did not wait. It detonated early. The singularity formed farther from its intended target, reducing efficiency, but still carving a wound to the swarm's flank. Human tactics shifted in real time. Ships accelerated at unpredictable intervals. Some feigned approach before veering away, drawing swarm distortions into empty space while sister vessels slipped through. They fought not as a unified fleet, but as autonomous hunters, each one an ending waiting to happen. The psychological shock. The swarm did not feel fear. It processed threat, yet something changed in its movement patterns. Where it had once surged continuously forward, it now hesitated at the edges of human approach vectors. Mass redistributed defensively. Biomass thickened around critical nodes. Swarm cohesion dropping by 9%, reported Keth. Impossible, murmured Saul. The Varelian swarm had never retreated from inferior force. But the executioners were not inferior force. They were strategic self-annihilation made weapon. Another human ship detonated. This time deep within the swarm's rear structures. Concord sensors had not even detected its insertion vector. How did they? Began a Lyrath analyst. Micro-jump, Adoran replied. Inside a gravity well. That is reckless, Saul finished, yet effective. A massive swarm organism, nearly the size of a dwarf planet, fractured along its central axis. Internal energy bled into vacuum. Smaller organisms disconnected, drifting without guidance. The swarm withdrew, not in full retreat, but in measurable contraction. It pulled mass back from the immediate edge of the veil. For the first time in 3 centuries, it yielded space. Aftermath. When the last human ship disengaged, those that remained, the battlefield was unrecognizable. 43% of the swarm mass in the veil had been eradicated. Human losses, 21 vessels. Concord losses, reduced by projected 70% compared to pre-engagement forecasts. Debris fields glittered between the stars. Within the Radiant Principle, Saul opened a direct channel. Admiral Vance. Her image appeared. Dim bridge lighting, faint tremor in the background. Yes, Arbiter, you have altered the balance of this war. That was the idea. You cannot sustain this indefinitely. No, she agreed. We don't plan to. A flicker of something unreadable passed through her expression. This was introduction, she said. Introduction? To show them, Vance replied, that consuming us will cost more than they can afford. Saul's facets dimmed thoughtfully. The swarm does not understand cost. It will, she said, beyond the command sphere. The remaining executioner ships drifted in loose formation, dark silhouettes against burning stars. They did not celebrate. They did not broadcast triumph. They simply recalculated trajectories. The galaxy had just witnessed something unprecedented, a species willing to weaponize its own extinction at the tactical level. And the swarm, vast, ancient, unstoppable, had taken its first step backward. The war had changed. The executioners had made sure of it. Victory, the Concord learned, was not a moment. It was a pressure after the Hethrian Veil. The swarm did not surge blindly forward again. It thickened, hardened, redistributed mass into layered formations that anticipated singularity strikes. Peripheral biomass became sacrificial buffers. Core organisms retreated deeper into protected clusters. The executioners had wounded it. Now it adapted. 3 systems farther spinward, in the fractured light of the Taurid expanse. The swarm launched a counteroffensive. Not of speed, but of reach. Gravitational lances extended ahead of its main body, warping space-time in filament-thin threads. Concorde picket ships were caught in those distortions and crushed without direct contact. Entire stations found their orbits destabilized, spiraling slowly toward their own stars. The swarm had stopped charging. It had started thinking tactically. Within the human command carrier UTD Resolute, Admiral Alara Vance watched the telemetry in silence. The Resolute was nothing like the Executioners. It was massive, angular, functional. Its hull bristled with sensor arrays and long-range artillery. It had not yet fired. It remained far from the front, just outside the densest gravitational distortions. A Concorde liaison, an Avar intelligence housed within a containment lattice, floated beside the main holodeble as a shimmering cloud. Your collapsar tactics are losing efficiency, the Avara said. The swarm has increased standoff distance. We expected that, Vance replied. You'll need to escalate. Vance's eyes did not leave the projection. No, she said. We need to shift. The smaller targets. Instead of launching another wave of executioner vessels into hardened mass, human fleets dispersed along the swarm's periphery. Strike craft emerged, sleek, needle-like ships too small to carry collapsars. Concorde observers initially assumed they were reconnaissance units. They were not. Each craft carried a payload measured not in tons, but in code. The Varelian swarm was biological, but not merely biological. Its coordination relied on subspace resonance, quantum links signaling across distributed neural clusters embedded in its largest organisms. It was a hive, and hives could be confused. Deployment window in 90 seconds, reported a human tactical officer. Confirm viral integrity, Vance said. Confirmed. Entanglement anchors stable. The Avara pulsed uneasily. You are introducing an informational pathogen into a galactic-scale organism. Yes. You cannot predict the outcome. No, Vance agreed, but we can guide it. The first wave of strike craft micro-jumped into the swarm's outer biomass. They did not fire. They attached. Self-destruct charges breached thin sections of membrane, injecting microscopic constructs, hybrid nanobiological devices encoded with quantum-locked routines. Then the craft withdrew or were destroyed. It did not matter. The virus was inside. The fracture. At first, nothing happened. Concorde fleets maintained defensive posture as the swarm advanced in deliberate, controlled arcs. Then telemetry began to stutter. Minor swarm organisms, one synchronized perfectly with core directives, shifted out of phase by microseconds. Gravitational harmonics desynchronized. Targeting patterns drifted. Signal coherence dropping by 3%. Reported a Keth analyst aboard a nearby Concorde vessel. Now 7. On the Resolute, human officers leaned forward. Stage 2, Vance ordered. Additional strike craft surged inward, targeting relay nodes, massive neural hubs buried within dread organisms. The virus propagated along entangled channels, and the swarm experienced something it had not in millennia: noise. Within the Taurid expanse, a cluster of swarm organisms halted mid-advance. Tendrils lashed unpredictably. One organism misinterpreted a proximity signal as threat and released a gravitational surge into its neighbor. The neighbor responded in kind. 2-kilometer-long constructs tore each other apart. Across the battlefield, more units faltered. Cohesion collapse accelerating, the Keth reported, voice trembling. 14%. 19%. The Avara within the Resolute dimmed its glow. You are inducing cognitive dissonance. Yes, Vance said quietly. You are forcing individuation. The word hung heavy. Individuation. The swarm's unity had been its greatest strength. Billions of organisms acting as one will. No hesitation. No internal conflict. Now, that unity fractured. Signals overlapped. Commands contradicted. Some organisms retreated instinctively. Others advanced. Still others froze, caught between incompatible directives. And for the first time in recorded history, the swarm hesitated. The moral line, within the Concorde assembly, emergency deliberations reignited. You are not merely destroying the swarm, Saul transmitted to Vance. You're altering its cognition. Yes, that may cause suffering. Vance's jaw tightened. Yes, you could continue singularity deployment and achieve extinction within projected tolerances. We could, she said. Then why choose this path? The battlefield flickered behind her. Swarm organisms colliding in confusion. Concord ships pressing cautiously forward. Vance spoke slowly. Because extinction is simple, she said. It's clean, final. She met Saul's refracted gaze. But if we wipe them out entirely, we prove their model right. Explain. They consume because they evolved to survive by consuming. If we answer that by annihilating them without alternative, she exhaled, then we're just a better swarm. The chamber fell silent. You are attempting to teach a hive mind restraint, Saul said. We're teaching at cost, Vance corrected, and consequence. The retreat. The virus did not destroy the swarm's intelligence. It fragmented it. Infected segments began isolating themselves to preserve coherence. Massive structures detached from primary mass and drifted outward. Entire tendril formations collapsed inward defensively. Forward advance slowed, then stopped. Concord fleets cautiously reclaimed abandoned space. Human forces did not pursue aggressively. They maintained distance, injecting additional viral payloads only when cohesion began to restabilize. It became a rhythm. Advance. Fracture. Withdrawal. The swarm began pulling back beyond the Perseus Drift, a sparsely inhabited region of unstable stars. Not routed, not exterminated, but choosing distance over engagement. In the tall Earth expanse, debris and inert biomass floated like the husks of shed skin. For the first time in 3 centuries, inhabited systems slept without evacuation alarms. The signal, weeks after the swarm's primary mass crossed the drift boundary, Concord deep-range sensors intercepted a transmission. It was not a conventional signal. It was a resonance pattern, a broadcast through subspace at frequencies the swarm once used to coordinate. Now it pulsed outward like a warning. Concord linguists and Keth probability engines worked in tandem to decode its structure. When they succeeded, silence rippled through the assembly. Saul requested confirmation 3 times. Then he opened a secure channel to Admiral Vance. We have translated the swarm's final transmission. Vance looked older than she had at Caro's. Sleepless. Let's hear it. Saul transmitted the decoded phrase. Avoid the blue star systems. They do not send warriors. They send endings. For a long moment, Vance said nothing. Outside her viewport, distant stars burned steady and indifferent. They're not wrong, she said at last. You feel no remorse? Saul asked carefully. Vance's eyes flickered, not with pride, but with something heavier. Every time we deploy an executioner, I sign the authorization, she said. Every time we release the virus, I know exactly what it's doing. She folded her hands behind her back, the same posture she had held in the assembly. Mercy isn't softness, she said. It's restraint when you have the power not to show it. And have you shown restraint? She looked toward the Perseus Drift, where the swarm had vanished into the dark. Yes, she said quietly. More than they'll ever know. Beyond the drift, the swarm reorganized, fractured, cautious, no longer expanding blindly. It had learned something alien. Not fear, not hatred, distance. And in the silence that followed, the galaxy realized a truth it had never considered before. Humans did not wage war to conquer. They waged it to end. And sometimes, ending something completely was the cruelest option of all. Peace did not arrive with celebration. It arrived with quiet. Along the reclaimed systems of the Heathrian Vale and Taurith Expanse, reconstruction fleets moved cautiously through debris fields still glittering with frozen fragments of the swarm. Concord engineers dismantled inert biomass structures, studying their internal architectures with wary fascination. Human ships did not linger long. The executioner platforms that remained were escorted back toward Terran-controlled space. They traveled without ceremony, dark hulls slipping through trade corridors now reopening to civilian traffic. Refugee Orcs returned home. Markets resumed. Stars burned on, indifferent to what had nearly consumed them. And yet, something fundamental had shifted. The swarm had not been destroyed. It had chosen distance. For a hive mind that had devoured entire civilizations without hesitation, choice was unprecedented. The summons. The Concord Assembly reconvened at Caro's. This time, the chamber was brighter, not in triumph, but in relief. Admiral Alara Vance stood again before the gathered elder species. She wore the same plain uniform. No new insignia. No ceremonial decoration. Behind her, projections displayed post-conflict analyses. Swarm territorial contraction, 18.7 light-years beyond pre-war borders. Concord system losses, stabilized. Human vessel losses, classified in detail, summarized only as significant. High Arbiter Saul addressed her. You have achieved what our combined civilizations could not in 3 centuries. We didn't do it alone, Vance replied. A subtle lie. The Concord knew it. So, did she? You altered the course of the swarm's evolution, Saul continued. Its expansion has ceased. Its internal signaling indicates reorganization around defensive rather than acquisitive patterns. Yes. You believe this change is permanent? Vance paused. No. The chamber stirred. It's not permanent, she repeated. Nothing is, but it will last long enough. Long enough for what? For them to remember. The cost. A new projection filled the chamber. Human casualty records. Names. Thousands of them. Some from the executioner crews. Minimal complements who had volunteered for collapsar deployment missions knowing survival probability approached 0. Others from strike craft units lost inside swarm biomass during viral injection operations. The Concord observed in silence. You did not conceal your losses, Saul noted. We don't hide our dead, Vance said. For morale? For accountability. She met the Arbiter's gaze. When you build weapons like ours, you don't get to pretend they're clean. The Avara representative pulsed softly. Your species has gained significant strategic leverage from this conflict. The swarm now identifies your territories as existential hazards. Yes. You could exploit that. Yes. Will you? The faintest shadow crossed her expression. No. The answer carried more weight than any threat. The swarm's message. Saul shifted the projection. The decoded resonance signal from beyond the Perseus drift shimmered at the center of the chamber. Avoid the blue star systems. They do not send warriors. They send endings. The phrase had spread quietly through Concord space. Not as propaganda, but as caution. You have acquired a reputation, Saul said. Vance gave a tired half-smile. We've had worse. The swarm categorizes you not as adversary, but as termination event. That's accurate. A pause. Does that not trouble you? Saul asked. Vance considered the neutron star spinning beyond the chamber walls. Caro's pulse, dense, violent, contained only by the Concord's engineering. We didn't choose the name, she said. They did. And you accept it? She turned back to him. We accept that when extinction shows up at your door, you either become prey, or you become a thing extinction fears. Silence settled over the assembly. The private conversation, after the formal session ended. Saul requested a private channel. The chamber dimmed, leaving only the Arbiter's crystalline form and the human admiral. There is something I do not understand, Saul said. Go on. You possess the capability to eradicate the swarm entirely. Our projections confirm it. With sustained collapsar deployment and viral escalation, total annihilation probability exceeded 91%. Yes. Why did you stop? Vance did not answer immediately. When we first encountered the swarm at Carve, she said slowly, we ran extinction models. And in every model where we exterminated them completely, something replaced them. Saul's facets refracted faint light. Explain. We have proven that the only stable solution to existential threat is total annihilation, she said. Every species would start building what we built, not to defend, to preempt. The implication rippled outward, an arms race measured in singularities. You fear what your example might inspire, Saul said. Yes. You are already feared. Fear's manageable, she replied. Imitation isn't. The new balance. Months passed. Trade resumed fully along the Veil. Joint Concord Human Research initiatives formed. not in weapons development, but in swarm behavioral study. Careful probes observed the distant mass beyond the drift. The swarm did not advance. It reorganized into dense, slow-moving clusters. Resource harvesting occurred within its new boundaries, but no expansion toward blue star systems. Human territories, meanwhile, did not fortify aggressively. They did not deploy fleets to the drift's edge. They waited. The executioner platforms were not dismantled, but neither were they multiplied. They existed, silent deterrents drifting in classified orbits. The name they gave us. A year after the first collapsar detonated at Heathrian, Sol addressed the assembly once more. The swarm has transmitted no hostile signals since withdrawal, he announced. Its boundary remains stable. He turned to the human delegation. The galaxy asked you for soldiers. Vance inclined her head slightly. And you send executioners. A murmur of agreement rippled through crystalline, gaseous, and mechanical forms alike. Sol's facets dimmed thoughtfully. In our history, executioners were feared, isolated, often despised. Vance nodded. Ours too. And yet, he continued, they existed to enforce law when all other remedies failed. Yes. You see yourselves in that role? Vance's gaze drifted to projection of the galaxy. Blue stars marking human systems. A vast shadow beyond the drift marking the swarm. We don't want the job, she said. But if something decides the only path forward is to erase everyone else. She looked back at him. Then we'll make sure it learns that erasing us costs more than it can afford. Outside Karos, the neutron star pulse, compressed fury held in balance. Contained, for now, beyond the Perseus drift. The swarm adjusted its trajectories subtly away from every mapped human system. And across the galaxy, a quiet understanding took root. If you seek alliance, humans will send diplomats. If you seek trade, they will send merchants. If you seek peace, they will send builders. But if you seek extinction, they will send the executioners.